Hey there, folks. So welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Open Mike Eagle called Brick Body Kids Still Daydream. Okay, it's been a tagline across many of my rap reviews this year that hip-hop hasn't exactly had a strong 2017. And yeah, I actually think that's mostly true, but I don't want to focus on that this time around because believe it or not, there have been good to even great rap records that have been released and I've covered them. I mean, I've already talked plenty of times at length about Run the Jewels, who started off the year effectively on top, but between the mainstream dominance of Kendrick Lamar, the stronger than expected returns from Jay-Z and Tyler the Creator, a solid sophomore follow-up from Joey Badass that really should be getting a lot more attention, yes, even from the mainstream, and potent underground successes from Uncommon NASA, Quelle Chris, and Milo, there have been albums worth talking about with real buzz, and yet this is the one that I was most excited about, falling in the last category of underground heavyweights aiming to drop the cerebral and experimental project that gets all the hip-hop heads talking. Although, what I found kind of amusing is not only is Open Mike Eagle affiliated with all of the underground acts that I just mentioned just previously, he's also building a pretty impressive bit of traction himself in his own lane off of well-deserved critical acclaim and a real cult following. I mean, let's face it, I might have missed covering a special episode of in 2015 as an EP, but I love dark comedy in 2014, and his collaboration with producer Paul White, Hella Personal Film Festival, and Paul White, who later went on to unleash madness with Danny Brown on Atrocity Exhibition. I mean, that record is remarkable and varied to this day. I still go back to it. But Brick Body Kids Still Daydream was looking to be something a little bit different. A concept record exploring the Robert Taylor homes, a housing project in the south side of Chicago that was torn down in the faceless rush of gentrification and yet was never properly rebuilt. Now, immediately my mind went to the Hope 6 Demolition Project, a potent if slightly directionless and kind of frustrating project from PJ Harvey last year that touched on similar themes. But given Open Mike Eagle's penchant for storytelling and empathy in a lot of his writing, this seemed like it would cut far deeper for me. In other words, you can bet this was a top priority for me to review as soon as possible. So what did I find on Brick Body Kids Still Daydream? Okay, let me get this right out of the gate right now. This is one of the best albums of the year. Period. But in comparison with other Open Mike Eagle records, it's probably one of the more difficult listens. Not in terms of production, which is probably his most successful synthesis of weird, slightly jazz-inflected melodies with buzzier grit and glitch and distortion yet, or in terms of content and bars, because again, Open Mike Eagle has been cultivating a refreshingly direct style, even despite his carefully interwoven pop culture references, his very dry wit, and a real eye for detail and empathy. No, what makes this record a harrowing listen is the content and especially the thematic arc, with the sort of go for broke final song that will remain one of the most haunting and powerful artistic moments that you will hear all year. A punch that so many other artists would have never dared to go. Well, they would have pulled that punch, but Open Mike Eagle doesn't. And that makes this record all the more startling and powerful. Now, before we get to that and why that final song hits so damn hard, we should talk about Open Mike Eagle himself as a rapper. And look, I'm not gonna deny that he's a bit of a tricky MC to embrace immediately, with his soft-spoken, very quick flow and tight multi-syllabic rhymes and the subtle notes of expressive emotion that creeps into his delivery. And that's not even touching on the fact that many of the emotions he likes to explore across his project, they're smaller feelings of discomfort that creep through his psyche, which could potentially lead to awkwardness, but if they ever do, it never feels stilted or incompetent. And that's because they might feature some of the most melodic and smooth flows of Open Mike Eagle's career to date, smoothed over and multi-tracked effectively in order to cultivate not only strong hooks, but a downbeat sense of 90s inspired normality, reflecting that neighborhood with history and character and the people who would live to see the earth shift underneath it. And while Open Mike Eagle does embody a few different characters on this record to powerful effect, he also lets his guest stars step up amazingly well, with Haslow's layered melancholy on 95 radios, and Sammus' star-making performance with the final verse of Hymnal. Seriously, she is incredible on that verse. I recommend that song and this album off that verse alone. But you can make an argument that another character in this story is the music and production itself, where Open Mike Eagle sheds his usual collage of glitchy samples for a very different set of beats and melodies. Right from legendary Iron Hood, the cymbal tone is fuller, the bass is dustier. The wheedling guitars, courtesy of They Might Be Giants guitarist Dan Miller, they accent the melodic swell courtesy of producer Exile. It's a tune that wouldn't really feel out of place in the 90s, but slightly more rounded and smooth with the passage of memory while still maintaining that potent melodic core. But even after that establishing moment, the keening keyboards of How Could Anybody Feel at Home against the sparse rattle of percussion subtly accents how something seems very much amiss. Something's changed. And as the record progresses, the bass will start to thicken. The melodies start to feel a little bit more barren and washed out. The crack of the hi-hats creep in to reflect something a little bit more brittle, a little more ominous. Sure, you get moments of brightness like the horns and the gentle foundation of guitar and drums on Happy Wasteland Day, or the swells of buzzy chiptune synth and horns on the phenomenal hook of Daydreaming in the Project. That song just gets me every time. Or the guitar that anchors the oddly fidgety bass bounce of TLDR smithing, but followed by the minor warping tones of Brick Body Complex and razor sharp trap beat. You can tell that something dire or very bleak is on the horizon lurking ahead. Really, the only tunes I think that suffer in this build-up are the blubbery build of Breeze Away Ritual, or the hollowed out lo-fi vocal filters on Wedding Ghost, before things thankfully correct with the rubbery beat and faint twinkles of 95 radios. But again, it's all building up to that final song. Warping, choppy chunks of noise and distortion that begin piling against one of the glitchiest beats of Open Mike Eagle's entire career. A desperate industrial hellscape that only needs over 2 minutes to create the sort of song that will inevitably play in your nightmares. Now, on the surface, that's a bit of a weird choice. End your record with by far your darkest song, and unquestionably a downbeat note. And yet to explain why it's so damn effective and so thematically potent, we need to talk about the content. Now, I initially made the statement this record was focused more on gentrification of the Robert Taylor Homes project in Chicago, and yet that's not quite true or fully encompasses the entire theme. It's darker and considerably more oppressive to fit in with the downbeat, almost monochromatic production, especially in comparison with previous records like Hella Personal Film Festival, which did have its brighter moments. And that's because the larger story on this record is that of trauma, one that comes when an uncaring system rips your home out from underneath you for absolutely no discernible reason. And Open Mike Eagle explores this from a variety of angles, from the subtle moments of uncertainty that comes up in a place where you always used to go to is closed when it shouldn't be, to speaking as the black man expected to hold up as implacable and strong and imposing in the face of strife, only then to be painted as villains for doing so. It's a reason why he's playing the role of Juggernaut from the X-Men on Legendary Iron Hood, or talking about how despite the injury, he's not letting any pain through on the intentionally awkward lo-fi clank of no selling Uncle Butch Pretends It Doesn't Hurt. But what's telling is that it's not an immediate sharp pain, but a grinding endurance test, especially in the face of an administration right now that Open Mike Eagle aptly describes as zombies and garbage that society's trying to tell him is normal. And yet, though, with the community behind him, he does feel strength in the face of that fear, especially as Daydreaming in the Project shows him how trivial some of those minor arguments within can really be. But again, it's a moment of respite because he's got that home, that place of stability he can come back to. And the next song, he embodies those buildings and the deeply rooted history they hold, but those are roots that can be severed. TLDR smithing, it hits on 2 cutting points. One, that truthful hip-hop observations can be lost in the trivializing blur when the real pain is missed or just overlooked because too long didn't read. Or the other is that this can very well happen to anyone. Anybody can truly be brought low by that system. That projection of strength and community, necessary in a world where a cop can profess malicious intent to kill a black man, plant a gun on him, and then get off scot-free, but it can intimidate those who have never needed to show that presence in community, and leads to folks falling in line or looking away until it's entirely too late. Because coupled with the thunderous weight of destructive wrecking balls tearing into that home comes its inevitability on some level, both with the passage of time and a system entrenched to trigger this trauma in its people, with little concern of those caught in the blast radius. And that's why the closing track, My Auntie's Building, hits with such terrifying impact. Not just because Open Mike Eagle once again speaks on the hook from the perspective of an old building in agony being torn down, but also from the man who lived there and witnessed the gross injustice of its demolition. Because it's never the timeshares that are torn down, the relentless pursuit of profit or convenience, it's always the projects. And what's all the more maddening is that Even now, there's nothing there but an undeveloped empty lot, all the people forced away, drawing parallels to the senselessness of death and the ruining of homes in the face of the system that will just bulldoze over everything in its way, seemingly for no deeper or no real substantial purpose. That's how Open Mike Eagle ends the album. You want a message of hope? You want some chance that things are going to get better and recover? You want even a consideration that something can be restored and changed? You don't get it. You don't get any of it, because this sort of trauma rarely gives those caught in its wake an easy answer, or an answer at all. And that says something. That means so much more, especially to those people there and to all of us who are now being forced to experience it. In other words, I can predict some audiences who might have been taken in by some of Open Mike Eagle's wit and nerdy references and empathetic power and off-kilter production choices being kind of alienated, a little bit thrown by the very stark political themes of the album, especially that ending. Despite being his most melodically accessible, despite hooks that are stronger than ever, despite his most consistent production and bars that are sharper than ever, and even a few songs that take a turn for the braggadocious side that shows that he's got a knack for inventive punchlines with real depth that will win over some in the hip-hop crowd. That ending, it'll either galvanize or terrify an audience. Probably a little bit of both, to be honest. But for me, the last time I got anything close to this sort of gut punch off a hip-hop album closer was Immortal Man from To Pimp a Butterfly. And while that record cut deeper in moments, Brick Body Kid's Still Daydream is a sort of pile driver off the top rope that you end up feeling a lot longer. Solid 9 out of 10, highest of my recommendations, and while this is not an easy listen, especially that ending, it's an essential one. Buy this album. You won't regret it. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. Like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I know this review got kind of heavy, but this is a heavy record. It's a pretty dark album too. And it's a sort of darkness that isn't superficial. It's not something like XXXTentacion, which I always found a little bit flighty. This isn't. This is heavy. This is meaty. It's mature. It deals with real-world subject matter. It doesn't give you the pleasant answer at the end. And again, buy this album. Link is in the description below. I got the poll up there. I want you guys to actually rate and talk about this album because, again, this deserves so much attention. And hey, if you guys want to be able to support this channel and you guys have some more input on my schedule, because yes, there's some stuff coming up, link to my Patreon right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once per week in the higher tiers you get to vote for records, movies, or even top 10 lists, and even add them yourself. More details in the description right there, but till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.